Hey all, this is Church of Caboose, and in this video is the next in the series of comparing Destiny 2 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare. In the past we had talked about the multiplayer as well as some other stuff, but today's video is going to focus on comparing Destiny 2 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare's campaign or story mode. Typically, campaign/story mode is something that game content creators use to try and give you a reason to want to play. Like, oh, I should hate these enemies and want to destroy them for this reason, that kind of thing. Like, it's not going to draw into play, as well as something that's a little bit more entertaining, perhaps, than just multiplayer fighting each other. For Destiny in particular, a lot of people will play the game just because of the story, due to how much story mode, like player burst environment, or PvE things, there are to do within Destiny 2. So we're going to start off with Destiny 2 just because of how much stuff there is to go over with Destiny 2, and then we will end the video with Modern Warfare. So Destiny 2 has tons and tons of story. Basically everything that exists within the game. Weapons, armor, and even like your abilities have some kind of a story tie to like the history behind the piece of gear, or the history behind like how that ability your character has was attained. There's just tons and tons of story, and it comes in many different forms. So you have a basic story mode you play through, like the campaign, like similar to most games like Call of Duty, and then after that campaign is done, you unlock a ton of different aspects to the game that let you dig even more. When you're playing through the story, you even have different things you can hold X or your console or PC equivalent to inspect that item, and you get read off some story modes, and you also can acquire like lore pieces, which are little chunks, like chapters if you will, of story on different areas. And there's just tons and tons of stuff. The Crucible, which is the multiplayer, has a couple of different modes such as Iron Banner, and then regular multiplayer, which is run by Lord Shaxx. Iron Banner is run by Lord Saladin. Lord Saladin and the Iron Lords have their own complete set of like heroes and story for the Iron Banner mode of Crucible, whereas Lord Shaxx has his own line of heroes and story that is tied to just kind of the regular Crucible. And within that Crucible, there is its own story of how Crucible was kind of like the entertainment, like football is now, like sports, you know, in the United States. Or if you want to think about more violent, like I guess activities, ancient Rome had the gladiators in the Colosseum, and people would go and watch these gladiators fight. Well, the Crucible is a similar thing. So the Crucible had its own heroes, and those heroes had specific weapons that only maybe they used, and those weapons had their own stories, either to how the hero got that particular weapon, or perhaps how it was used later on. A famous pair of weapons that has tons and tons and tons, like literally hours of story behind it, is the Thorn and Last Word. If you want to know more about that, I would suggest you check out My Name is Bife's YouTube channel. He has some insane, like almost movie type content created about those two weapons, and they are rather historic in the Destiny 2 universe. There's just tons and tons of story, and then you even have endgame. So games like Destiny 2, like MMORPG type things, will have modes where you have something called a raid and nightfall. These are kind of endgame, meaning that they are tougher, you get better rewards for completing the activities, and they also have their own sets of stories. And raids in particular will have mechanics, and every mechanic will have reasons and story behind it, of like why you have to do this thing, or when you spawn into an area, why that area looks the way that it does. Like, it gets really nuts. If I was to try and get really in-depth and detail on everything with the story in Destiny 2, this video would be hours long and very, perhaps not much of a good summary. I'm just trying to compare a little bit to Destiny 2 and Modern Warfare stories. That way you can kind of think about if you'd be interested in either game or both of them. And Destiny 2 gets intense. Like, the armor has lore pieces behind it. The raids get nuts as far as like what is happening. There's this whole like futuristic horrible enemy called the Darkness that almost beat the source of energy called the Traveler, that gives you and your other fellow Guardians your powers, and that by itself is also a very long story. They even have like a timeline of things like the Golden Age, the collapse, just a whole bunch of stuff that would make this game very interesting. However, you'd have to put in quite a bit of work in order to learn about the story. One of the downsides of how Bungie decided to present the story for Destiny 2 is that it's not very apparent at face value, meaning you play through the story, you will probably get just the very, very tiny tippity top of the iceberg, and so you need to be digging and reading through lore tabs on websites such as the Ishtar Collective. Now, your character can unlock lore tabs, but if you don't get lucky, it will be out of order, and it'll take a very long time to unlock all these lore tabs or chapters of a book in order to be able to read the whole book. So a lot of people enjoy using the Ishtar Collective. For example, I have been playing Destiny pretty hardcore since its inception in 2014, and I do not have every single piece of lore unlocked on my character. So using the Ishtar Collective is a very good resource to learn the story if that is something you are interested in. There is also a YouTube content creator who is very, very popular and puts on full-on cinematic movies called, his name is My Name is Bife. So if you want to check him out, go for it. Just type in My Name is Bife. His channel's logo is something like a lion or a tiger head, something like that. And he's got a ton of subscribers and puts out some great stuff. So if you're into Destiny or you think you might be, I would suggest watching his videos because he does basically puts on movies about these different aspects of lore, such as raids, armor, of new things that are coming out in the game, what have you. He covers everything that is story or lore related. So I would suggest you check him out. So some things I really love with the story is that it's great. You have heroes like Lord Saladin, the Iron Lords, who stops an invasion of Siva or something like that. You've got a dude named Saint 14 who I absolutely adore. He's a Titan with a Russian voice, and I like to think he's Russian. And he's done things like, I'm out of ammo, so I'm going to headbutt this huge enemy boss dude to death. That's why his helmet in the story is dinged, which is another thing. If you have these huge heroes, there are oftentimes story reasons for why their helmets and armor looks the way that they do. Saint 14 has a dent in his helmet, and the reason why is because he headbutted a fallen Kel, which is a type of enemy and a boss of that type of enemy. He headbutted that dude to death, and that's why he has a dent in his helmet. So it gets super in-depth, and that's about as far as I can talk about it without wasting too much of your time. Just know there's a ton of story with Destiny 2. Again, what I don't like is that you do have to dig quite a bit by either watching videos, reading lore, maybe you buy one of Bungie's lore books that kind of puts everything together. I don't know what else to say besides the story of Destiny is immense and it is insane and it is often very, very, very interesting. You just have to put in a lot of work in order to learn about it. So let's talk real quick about Modern. Okay, so for Modern Warfare is one of the newer first-person shooters in the Call of Duty franchise. Came out back in November of 2019. The campaign for this is pretty typical to most Call of Duties for the most part. It's just kind of clear out areas, you shoot up enemies, and that's about it. Destiny 2 can have mechanics, especially in the end game, that require 6-man teams working together in order to get puzzles broken basically while fending off ads or enemies, whereas Call of Duty is more or less just shoot everything up. But Call of Duty does sometimes change things up in the story mission from just shooting to having things like perhaps you control some security footage, as you do in Modern Warfare's campaign, and you lead a scared person whose embassy is under attack, and you have to lead them to safety without being spotted. They will also have in their Call of Duty campaign sometimes things like getting a new sniper rifle and adjusting to the zoom, and then you have like these hordes of enemies coming at you. So that's kind of cool because you're getting used to a new weapon, and you have weapon drop or bullet drop, wind. The wind will. I'm blanking on the actual terminology. I'm embarrassed because I'm a Marine Corps veteran, but bullet adjustment where the wind affects where your bullet goes as well as the distance, and then you have lots and lots of cutscenes that really try to explain what the story is about. However, that's all really the story is. The majority of the Call of Duty franchise is built around its multiplayer game. Weapons don't necessarily have a lore or a story to them like they do in Destiny 2. For example, a Destiny 2 weapon with lots of lore to it would be the Thorn or Last Word. There's a history to the characters that wielded them, and their own rivalry, and how those weapons became the way that they are. Whereas in Call of Duty, you have an M4, and it's cool. I mean, M4s are a thing militaries use, and so it makes sense that that weapon would be an option to play with in the game. And that's about the extent of the lore. The campaign mission isn't, or the campaign part of Call of Duty, as of when I had checked back in December, had not really been completed by about 70% of the community. So about 30% have beaten the campaign back in December of those that have been playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Call of Duty tends to do a good job of trying to emotionally bring you in, though. And sometimes they have continuity between titles that are within the same franchise, if you will. So all the Modern Warfare Call of Duties tend to have some kind of a carryover with each other, such as Captain Price. He is known as from the original Modern Warfare way back several years ago, and is in this current Modern Warfare. Then you sometimes have flashbacks where you are building relationships, such as in this Modern Warfare. You have a 10-year flashback to explain why Captain Price and this chick, Farah, I apologize if I say her name wrong, she is, I'm not sure what nationality, but from some country in the Middle East. She is a fighter that is fighting against the oppression of the terrorists and her government. I mean, somehow she and Captain Price have a relationship with each other. And I don't want to give much spoilers. I just want, the only example I wanted to give to y'all. So Call of Duty does have a campaign. It's pretty emotionally drawing you in. I do really enjoy it. It is kind of long though, and that's kind of weird because you talk about Destiny 2 and how everything is lore. Well, I've been trying to get through the campaign, which is why if you follow my Twitter, this video got released a day or two after I said it would. And it's just taking hours to get through it. Part of the reason is because the campaign is harder on Call of Duty than it is on Destiny 2. Mostly because in Destiny 2, if you do just the basic story missions, such as you can do with Call of Duty, in Destiny 2, you can kind of do whatever you want, and odds are you will survive, and you can also have a couple of people playing with you. Whereas in Call of Duty, you don't have multiplayer options for the campaign. It's just yourself, and then the AI, the other characters, help you out more than they would in Destiny 2, and you just kind of play through it, have some fun, get it over with in a couple of hours, and you're like, cool, I'm done. Woohoo! Thank God, that's over with. And then you just do multiplayer until you die, to the end of your days, and that's it. So Call of Duty does not have nearly as extensive of a base for the story as Destiny 2 does. I'm not saying that things like YouTube content creators that talk about the story of Call of Duty or Reddit channels exist or don't exist. I'm just saying they're not as apparent to me that they do exist as Destiny does. But I've also been playing Destiny a lot longer, so I could be wrong. I just feel like it's worth mentioning that if there are people that create content explaining the story of Destiny 2, they're not as obvious and that easy to find as they are for Destiny 2. Alright guys, I really hope this video kind of helped to compare the different the campaign story modes and why people play the games between Destiny 2 and Call of Duty. A lot of people play Destiny 2 just for the story. Most folks play Call of Duty for the multiplayer, not the story. The Call of Duty story is perhaps a little bit more emotionally gripping at face value, and there's not really much of digging and looking at content creators' content and reading books or chapters on anything, whereas Destiny 2 does not have a whole lot of face value for its story. But if you do lots of digging and watching My Name is Bife on YouTube and the Ishtar Collective, you will find there's tons of story. So I hope this video was entertaining to y'all. If it was, please subscribe to my channel, or at least click that like button. And thanks so much for watching. I am Church of Caboose. Have a great week and happy grinding, y'all.